This is Robin Monotti, my friend.
Eric Clapton. So thanks for sending me that message about your experience. This, in a way, testimony of what happened to you was then shared quite a lot. And it had reactions, and it had also fact checkers, in the sense that people wanted to know if it was true, if I was making it up. Well, I wasn't making it up. Here we are. But that didn't satisfy the fact-checking. And so we're getting to a stage where personal testimonies, personal experiences are almost, they need to go through a filter of someone saying whether you are authorized to have your own experience and to interpret it, not even interpret, to recount it in a way, and someone else saying, no, actually your interpretation of your own experience, the fact-checking may say it's wrong, because that's how we felt. And there's someone saying that, you know, we're lying, but you know, it's your experience, and I'm sharing it through a platform that I basically edit. So it's a strange world where you cannot even have your own experience anymore, and without someone saying, well, you know, you're not, that's not the right experience. You say, hold on a minute, that's mine. And so, you know, why am I doing it? Well, what's my experience? My experience is that we were in a family with 6 people, and 4 of us got COVID, and we're talking about December 2019 and beginning of January. We got it at different times, and 4 of us got it. 2 were kids. It was, you know, quite like flu for kids. I mean, they were quite wiped out for a few days, but they recovered without, you know, pretty much anything. And when for the adults, it was myself and another adult who started before me. We got to the stage of bilateral lung infection and, you know, days very, very high temperature. So we called a doctor at that stage, because, you know, usually I don't tend to call doctors because I think these things go, but it wasn't going. And the temperature was, you know, in my case was 40.4, which I hadn't had since I was a kid in the 70s. Then I looked it up, and I think it would have been maybe the Russian flu or the Soviet flu, 1976. But I haven't had a temperature like that, it maybe ever. So anyways, we called the doctor at some stage. The doctor didn't know, because we're talking, it's kind of across New Year's, basically New Year's 2020. And people weren't even talking about COVID, but then I looked at all the symptoms were those, and we had a different experience than we ever had with the flu, although, you know, the sort of the matrix of the experience is the same, but it was different in the sense that, you know, there's very strong joint aches, total loss of smell and taste for days, very, very high temperature, and also lung infection. I never had one before. So the doctor came, and he had a look at it, and I said, "Doctor, what is it?" And he said, "It's a virus." He didn't know what virus it was. He gave the other person, who was much worse than me, because it had been going for longer, azithromycin. And the other person's illness had started about a week before me, and I got to the lung infection stage as well, and he gave me just Augmentin. So mine is an antibiotic. Azithromycin is actually considered a bacteriostatic, kind of stops the growth of bacteria rather than necessarily kills them all. So one day later, I'm sort of looking at the temperature with a lot of attention, and the temperature starts going down, you know, gradually. But, you know, it had sort of got to this level. It wasn't moving, and we started the disease at the same time. The next day, one day and a half, started going down. We kept on taking. Basically, there was, you know, azithromycin for me was Augmentin, then it was vitamin C, probiotics, and we try and get as much sun whenever there was any sun. It came down at exactly the same time, in pretty much the same way, until basically the illness was treated. It was treated. So what am I trying to get to? My experience was that I already knew in January, December, recognizing all of the symptoms, because there's no doubt these are exactly the symptoms of COVID. I knew that this can be treated because I got treated, and the other person who was in my family who was pretty bad got treated. So I knew that this could be treated. When in March the first instructions were given from above, they didn't really make sense to me, because the instructions that I knew from on my own skin were treatment, not there's no treatment, and also quite standard treatment, because, you know, the wide spectrum antimicrobial, because, you know, the doctor at the time said, I don't know exactly what virus it is, I'll give you something which goes across the board so it can get a lot of things. So everything didn't really quite make sense. And then when they said you need to stay at home, I thought, well, actually, the little that I know about the immune system is that you need sun. And we're talking about March, we're talking about spring. People have had a whole winter with very little sunlight. This is exactly when you need to go out. So you need to be told the opposite. You need to be told, don't stay indoors, go out. And so that's when I started sort of looking at it. And then I started studying it, so became a student. And I saw that actually what does the sun do? It stimulates these T cells, and these T cells go and kill the cells that are infected. So that's kind of your main weapon. And then I read up about it, and that's really our strongest weapon that acts even before the antibodies are made. So none of this made sense, and I started sharing this kind of relatively basic science until I got more and more into it, and everything I shared went against what we were being told. So that's how I happened to run this channel, which was very science-based. And a lot of the things were sent also by Mike Eden, who knows a lot more than me about all of this, and I kind of became a student of his. But anyways, that's sort of to say how I got to sharing information. And, you know, there's a lot of people on the channel who send me things all the time, and I just share them too. It's kind of a community in a way. And, you know, I'm very glad that it's been helpful for you too. What I was doing before that is actually not too far away, because it's actually a film that it's on the doctor-patient relationship. And it's there's one patient, but there's two doctors, and maybe the patient is the doctor, maybe the doctor's a patient. So it sort of confuses the whole situation, as often is the case, because it's a complex relationship between a patient and usually more than one doctor whenever there is a problem. If the more serious the problem is, usually the more doctors are consulted. Yeah. And there's a lot of different judgments that you make according to who do you trust, why do you trust them. And I think the moment that the government starts to issue almost edicts across the board how we should all behave, I think it's almost guaranteed that they're going to get it wrong. I don't really think there is any way you can get it right the moment you start to profess doctorship to everyone, because we're all different. We've got different immune systems, different ages, different also psychology, different way things make us feel bad. And actually the problem is that you can get very scared by a situation where you have, on a daily basis, these kind of doctor-like instructions issued, do this, do that, do this, and maybe you're okay, maybe you're not okay, and maybe you're going to be afraid, maybe you're going to die, maybe you're going to take a vaccine, maybe you're going to booster. It's very scary to be under this situation. And so I think now that that we can socialize again, and you're one of the first people I was delighted to meet physically. I think we should do that. And one new sort of initiative that we had, and a group of people part of the Telegram group, was something called Love Not Fear. So to remember to sort of overcome the possible fear that has kept us in a way locked into a way of being where we are even almost too comfortable on social media. I'm kind of part of it, but we're almost too comfortable in a bubble. Then there's another bubble, and then we don't really meet between these bubbles. Anyway, we need to try and meet. And even if we sort of burst a few other bubbles when we meet with other people, I think it's important now for all of us to do what, in a way, what we're doing now, which is actually go beyond the social media and actually meet. And I think this campaign of Love Not Fear, which is at the moment it's on Instagram, and the handle is Love Not Fear Mankind, is to try and bring people to share this message, which is really about mental health awareness. And we've got two professors who have been doing a lot of work on the COVID anxiety syndrome, Professors Nikcevic and Spada, who are based in London, and they wrote an introduction, and we're going to sort of put this up as part of the website. and in a way to try and go beyond this kind of different camps which you talked about, which I don't think is really helpful for anyone. And so I think to try and say, look, nobody likes being afraid. It doesn't matter what camp you may be. And you know, sometimes there are situations, maybe there was a situation where there was an unknown entity and people were afraid. But I think now it's almost like the most studied, you know, one of the most studied virus in the shortest amount of time ever. Now everyone's looking at it. So I think now it's not about being afraid. We know what we're dealing with. We know the situations. It's about actually going back to our social life. And the thing is that, you know, I've got some anxiety about everything that's going on. Maybe I'm less scared of COVID because I had it. I'm more scared about other things that have come with COVID. But I've got anxiety. But I know that whatever direction the fear comes from, it's actually doing a little bit what we're doing now, which is meeting other people, having a chat, looking at each other in the eyes, getting a sense for each other as sort of physical and spiritual and emotional beings, which is really helpful. I mean, it's been very helpful for me to listen to your story in person, apart from the message, because I can see where you're coming from, and it also grounds me as a person. So I think this is the message I would want to give now, is that we all need to try and sort of meet again and beyond whatever camps we're in, and just socialize again in order to try and overcome. I think this is the only thing that's going to work, is for us to be social again, so we can let go everything that has been taking us where we are in a place of fear, and replace it with something more positive, where we can build something positive. And yes, there are. We all know there are obstacles that we need to overcome, but I think we need to do it together.
When I would watch the channel, for instance, I'd get into bed and have a look. It's America's on now, you know, or Australia's on now, and you think, my God, it would be amazing to meet, to be able. Then the travel thing becomes, how do we do that? That's one of the big boundaries that I think we're gonna have to deal with, is how do we get back to free movement without the passport? I mean, because at the moment, people just seem to be moaning, but we need some constructive ideas about how to open things up again physically, so that we can travel.
One of the things that I did when I was still more on Twitter than Telegram, then I put it in, is I went to have a look at, they have a study in the US from 2014 to 2017, where they tracked all the coronaviruses, which the main ones were 4, and they tracked them as to when people went to the hospital with respiratory disease, they tested them for them, and maybe for other viruses as well, and then they tracked them. And basically how it went, and we're talking about northern hemisphere, they were slightly different. The curves went slightly further up for some areas further north, and there was less steep. But they basically started peaking around December and reached a peak like end December, beginning of January, and then sort of dropped down. So I think if there's one thing that I learned, is that, you know, this family of viruses, coronaviruses, beta coronaviruses, they do have this peak around December, January, every year, every single year. Always had it, probably always will. So there a degree of loosening restrictions when we get to the season of summer is to be expected. The problem is we will get respiratory disease peaks again in December, and we need to try and deal with them, not in this kind of across the board same way that we've done before. And people can make their own decisions. If they feel at risk, they can stay home more. But I think what was wrong is, coming back to the doctor-patient relationship, is to sort of suddenly have big doctor that says to everyone, you do the same thing. No, we've got different, I've had COVID. I may want to go out and take my risk. Someone else may be more scared, but I don't think this across the board is really what we should be doing. And that comes to traveling as well. It comes to crossing borders as well. I think it should not be, again, something which applies to everyone, because, some people already had it. And am I allowed to prove it? No, I'm not. I'm given a tiny little window. If I had a recovery over the last 3 months, we had a tiny window of proving anything, and I shouldn't be put in a position to prove something that I've had in sort of December 19, January 20 at this stage. So I think if it doesn't make a public health sense, and that is what is worrying, because it makes sense on a level that is much more troubling than the level of public health.
Yeah.
Mainly hospital buildings is where people go when they get ill. When I was ill, if the treatment didn't work, treatment worked. I think treatments do work for this disease. They worked for me. People will go to the hospital, especially if they're not given early treatment. Treatment should happen early. That's because they're symptomatic. The more the symptomatic, the more the transmissibility, the contagion, for all sorts of levels. It means the virus is basically replicating much more, it's creating more symptoms. So the hospital building becomes where most contagion will actually end up happening, with people who are maybe weak from other immune suppressing diseases or other things. And you don't lock down hospitals. That's the main thing. You cannot lock down a hospital. If you think about an ICU, the ratio of nurses to patients, the ideal one is kind of 1-to-1, and people under COVID said it actually should be 2 nurses to 1 patient. There's, some people in Italy at the beginning were saying this should be the ratio. So if you think about it, you've got, at least in that department, you've got half of the people who are going in and out every day. So it's a myth. The idea that there's a lockdown is a myth, because there cannot be a lockdown of a hospital in an urban setting. There cannot be, people go in and out. And it's the same with a care home. If you then move people from hospitals to care homes and it spreads in a care home, people are going in and out. And yes, you can wear as many masks as you like, but you can still bring a virus in and out. And maybe the person is healthy and maybe nothing happens to him, but maybe you have a few sleepless nights because you're stressed out about what's going on with all your patients, and then you develop it, and it's out. And this is on a daily basis. Hundreds, thousands of people are going in and out of hospital, and that is really where the symptomatic spread happens. The people who are made to stay at home and not going to the shop, they're the healthy ones. So that is, in very simple terms, why a lockdown can never work when you have hospital buildings or care home buildings, because those are always open, and that's where the spread is. Because an asymptomatic person is not, even Fauci said it on camera, so it's not even my words. It's, asymptomatic people have never been the drivers of transmission. Never.
In all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers.
That's something that we should be ready to bring with us from this last winter to next year, is to say, forget about the asymptomatic issue. I'm not here to prove or disprove. All I'm trying to say is it's pretty clear that the symptomatic people are in hospital, and so that's why you.
It's also another very useful tool to promote fear too, isn't it? It's that although that person appears to be healthy and looks healthy, he may be carrying, so stay away. I was wearing a mask early on to show that I respected other people, the way they did in Japan, they had been doing for centuries or decades, where someone is ill, they wear a mask to show everyone, and that it's a form of respect. And then, after that, once that became fear-based, and I think now they've crossed the line. There's always a line where, when masks became mandatory, there was some, is it gone?
Yes.
We lost in a way.
both a preventive and a diagnostic medical intervention. So the preventative is the face mask, it's maybe the lockdown, or the diagnostic, but also, let's say, the medical intervention per se, like the vaccination. All of these require consent. And the Declaration of Bioethics and Universal Human Rights, UNESCO 2005, Article 6. They require consent. So the mask requires consent. I need to consent. It doesn't matter if you are sitting in Westminster with something with a 99.9 something % survival. You're not entitled to override my own consent. Even if you think you are, I don't think you are, because I think these human rights are inalienable. And as far as I am concerned, they're more important than whatever temporary earthly kind of power of a local government, local I mean even nationwide, decides for, the inalienable human rights. So the mask, the lockdown, I need to consent. If you could say, like in Sweden, we advise some people to stay. If I don't consent, I should not be made to be discriminated upon, fined, or pay any price for something which is medical in nature. And with the vaccination, it needs to be informed consent. And the information needs to be updated constantly. Why do some people come to my Telegram channel? Because people are sending me the latest information, and I'm sharing it. But this information should make its way to a vaccination center, not on my Telegram channel. I'd rather go back and do, buildings and films, which is what I was doing. But if people don't do what they're supposed to do, then someone else is going to step up and do it,